Crawford Family Murders, A Night of Horror. Chapter 1. A Seemingly Happy Family. Victoria, Australia, 1970. In the quiet suburb of Glenroy, the Crawford family appeared to live a normal life. Elmer Crawford, an experienced electrician, was known for his disciplined nature. His wife, Teresa, was a loving homemaker who devoted herself to raising their 3 children, Catherine, 12, James, 8, and Karen, 6. From the outside, the Crawfords looked like a typical working-class family. They owned a modest home, their children attended school, and they engaged in everyday activities like any other household. However, behind closed doors, their reality was much darker. Elmer Crawford was a controlling man with a rigid set of rules. He wanted complete authority over his family, and Teresa was beginning to notice disturbing changes in his behavior. She felt trapped in a life that was gradually becoming more suffocating. Financial troubles added to the tension, and whispers of Elmer's gambling habits and erratic spending circulated among neighbors. Their arguments grew more frequent, and Teresa confided in a close friend that she feared for her safety. Little did she know, her worst fears would soon become reality. Chapter 2. A Calculated Murder. June 1st, 1970. Under the cover of darkness, Elmer Crawford set his gruesome plan into motion. He had meticulously planned the murders, ensuring that he left behind no incriminating evidence. His first step was disabling the household's electrical wiring, modifying it so that he could administer controlled electric shocks. Late at night, when his wife and children were asleep, he carried out his attack. Teresa was the first to be electrocuted, her body convulsing in silent agony before she fell unconscious. One by one, he repeated the process on Catherine, James, and little Karen. But electrocution was not enough for him. He needed to ensure they were dead. He took a blunt object, possibly a hammer, and bludgeoned each of his children, crushing their skulls. For Teresa, he chose a different method, strangulation. The force he exerted on her throat left deep bruises, suggesting a struggle. Whether she regained consciousness for a few brief, horrifying moments remains unknown. By the time the sun rose, the Crawford family was no more. Chapter 3. Covering up the crime. Elmer worked quickly to eliminate all traces of his horrific deeds. He wrapped the bodies in blankets and methodically placed them in the trunk of his car. Blood was scrubbed away, furniture was repositioned, and any potential clues were disposed of. Despite the chilling precision of his cleanup, there were lingering details, traces of blood missed in the rush, inconsistencies in the household's normal routine. Yet, to an untrained eye, the house appeared undisturbed. Elmer then drove out of town, searching for a location to dispose of the bodies where they would not be discovered easily. His plan? To stage an accident that would make it seem like his family had died under tragic but natural circumstances. Chapter 4. A Grisly Discovery. For several days, no one saw the Crawford family. Friends and neighbors found their absence unusual. They were not a family that took sudden trips without informing anyone. On June 6, 1970, police responded to reports of an abandoned car near Chelsea Beach, Victoria. When officers approached the vehicle, they were met with an unbearable stench. Opening the trunk, they found the decomposing bodies of Teresa and her 3 children, carefully wrapped in blankets. An immediate investigation was launched. Autopsy reports confirmed that the victims had been electrocuted, then brutally beaten or strangled. The killings were not an impulsive act of rage. They were planned, calculated, and executed with precision. Elmer Crawford was nowhere to be found. Chapter 5. The Hunt for a Ghost. With Elmer Crawford identified as the primary suspect, authorities launched a nationwide manhunt. His description was circulated, and roadblocks were set up across Victoria. Investigators combed through his financial records, questioning colleagues and acquaintances. But there was no trace of him. Weeks turned into months and months into years. Sightings were reported, but never confirmed. Some believed he had fled to another country, while others speculated he had taken his own life to escape capture. In 2005, an unidentified elderly man's remains were discovered, and many hoped DNA testing would confirm it was Crawford. However, the results proved otherwise. It was someone else. Chapter 6: Theories and Speculation. How did Elmer Crawford manage to disappear without a trace? Investigators and amateur sleuths have offered various theories over the decades. Suicide theory. Some believe he ended his life shortly after the murders, possibly in a remote area where his body was never found. New identity. Others suggest he fled to another country, assumed a new identity, and lived out the rest of his life undetected. Assisted escape. A few believe he may have had help from an unknown accomplice who provided him with resources to evade capture. Underground network. Some conspiracy theorists claim that he might have been protected by criminal organizations or a network of individuals willing to shelter fugitives. In 2010, a man resembling Elmer was detained in the United States. Investigators were hopeful that they had finally found their suspect. However, without concrete evidence or DNA confirmation, the case went cold once more. Chapter 7: The Unanswered Questions. Despite being one of Australia's most infamous fugitives, Elmer Crawford was never caught. His whereabouts, or even his fate, remain unknown. The murder of his wife and children left behind not only a grieving extended family, but an entire community haunted by unanswered questions. How could a man kill his family in such a brutal manner and disappear without a trace? To this day, some believe he is still alive, hiding under a false identity. If he were still alive, he would be well into his 90s, perhaps even over 100 years old. Perhaps the truth will never be known. Conclusion: a legacy of horror. The Crawford family murders remain one of the most chilling and unresolved crimes in Australian history. It is a case of cold-blooded brutality, an unsolved mystery, and an unanswered question that lingers in the minds of those who study true crime. For decades, authorities have searched for justice. But Elmer Crawford, if he is still alive, continues to evade capture. His victims, however, are not forgotten. Though time has passed, one question continues to echo. How does a man murder his family, walk away, and simply vanish? And perhaps more chillingly, has he been watching all along?